Alrighty guys, welcome back to another little video where today we're going to be doing something kind of unneeded but fun. Today, we're going to make a totally dead silent computer out of my Dell T3500. Let's get into it. Okay, so here was kind of the premise of this video. After making making the video where I had completed my Dell Precision T3500, it got a lot of positive feedback where people were very, very impressed with the build. And I kind of had this desire in the back of my head that I wanted to make it dead silent when I was going to be building it. The only problem was the only power supply that I really had access to at that point was my, my ProMiner Butterfly, which by all means is not a bad power supply. It's just not exactly quiet. So when I was able to get my hands on a new power supply, I decided I kind of wanted to take this as an opportunity to try and, well, fulfill this little bit of a desire to have a totally dead silent computer. So there was a few things that I was going to need to actually pull this off. Number one, a new power supply. And so I decided to go with a tried, tested, and true power supply, one that I have actually been using for quite some time, and that would be a Rosewill Capstone Gold rated power supply. Now, the Capstone Golds are some of their higher end power supplies, and right now are kind of hard to find. Luckily, I was able to find an open box variation of it on eBay for about $60, and for a 650 watt 80 plus gold rated power supply, that really wasn't all that bad of a deal. Especially being the fact that in future upcoming videos, I'm going to need more power supplies for more project computers. So being able to find a very good quality power supply that I knew was going to be almost completely dead silent was definitely going to make my life a little bit easier. So the next things that we're going to be using, and well, pretty much the last things we're going to be using, are some Noctua fan resistor cables. These fan resistor cables are actually kind of cool. Essentially, they take the voltage or the current that is going to be going to your fans and lowering it, essentially causing you to have, well, slower fans. Slower fans equal lower noise. So between the new power supply and having all of my fans and pump on my computer all running a little bit slower, I wanted to find out how actually quiet I could make the computer. And I actually had pretty darn good success. Let me show you what I mean. Now that weird clicking noise that you're hearing is actually my mirrorless DSLR camera. I don't know why it does that clicking noise when it's recording, but that's just something it does. But if you ignore that little bit of annoying clicking noise, you probably realize that the computer is actually pretty quiet, surprisingly quiet, especially compared to what it was before. Take a listen. And as you could probably tell by the sound of that clip, you couldn't actually hear the camera clicking. That's because the sound of the computer was simply overpowering the sound of the camera. If that just goes to show you how loud exactly the computer used to be versus how loud it is now. And beforehand it was not exactly loud, but now it is almost completely dead silent. But not everything is glamorous and amazing, because there is one severe issue. In the original build, or the original version, where it was quite a bit louder, I was actually able to maintain a pretty decent overclock of 1080 megahertz on the core. Now, the stock R9 Fury will go up to 1040, so I had a 40 megahertz overclock offset to 1080. But when trying to use it in its current configuration with the much quieter fans, the system will crash once we hit 61 degrees C. Now, originally, with the fans being much faster, we only hit a maximum of 58 degrees C. So hitting 61 degrees C now just causing the entire system just to crash and freeze. Or freeze and crash. So I had to get a little bit creative, and that's where I started underclocking and undervolting the R9 Fury. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to try and do was try and run the card at stock instead of running it overclocked. Running the card at stock, we still hit the 61 degree limit and the card crashed again. Meaning that I probably have extremely lost the Silicon Lottery and my card simply cannot take any temperatures above 61 degrees C. Which, I guess it doesn't really surprise me. I've gotten some really good luck on the Silicon Lottery. It's about time I get some really bad luck on the Silicon Lottery, so I digress. Or the next test that I did after just trying to run it at stock was try and run it at stock with a lowered temperature limit. But unfortunately, because of that, the card started thermally throttling a little bit because I set my temperature limit at 55 degrees C to keep it underneath that 61 degrees C temperature limit where it crashes. And when it was sitting at 55 degrees C, it would bounce between like 970 megahertz back up to the 1040, causing weird FPS fluctuations, where it would simply have been a better experience if it was dropped to a lower megahertz, which would have essentially given it a lower temperature. But for the final thing that I did, and actually the way that I've been running the card for a while now, I dropped the card all the way down to 940 megahertz, a 100 megahertz off of the core clock. That is a little bit of an extreme underclocking, especially for one of these AMD cards. But on top of that, I also messed around with the voltages. Now, I don't know if that actually had any meaningful impact on the temperatures, but I will say, when I undervolted and underclocked the graphics card, I hit a maximum of 48 degrees C on the entire loop, running the same graphics test. So what that tells me is that either the undervolting or the underclocking did some seriously good work, because now we are nowhere near that thermal problem. And I will definitely need to spend some more time working with the actual overclocks, or I guess I should say underclocks and undervolts, to get a happy medium. I could probably have the card up another 30 to 40 megahertz before running into thermal issues, but yet again, I will still need to be doing that testing. But once I actually get all of that testing done and completed, I will be making a benchmarking video, really going through a lot of the, new thermal limits and kind of talking about like my new experiences with this thing, because it's actually kind of interesting. I've never tried underclocking and undervolting a card like this before, especially one of these AMD cards, because normally I just overdo my cooling capacity to make sure that I always have the ability to keep these cards running at their maximum performance. But this is where I'm going to be cutting today's video off. I'm going to be doing a bunch of benchmarks. I've actually upgraded the storage on this rig, so I will be able to do a lot of different game benchmarks, and I will hopefully have that up in like the next week or so. Hopefully this week, because I missed last week's upload and I feel terrible. I'm so sorry, guys. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for staying tuned. Thank you very much for putting up with my shenanigans. And thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful weekend. Have a wonderful whatever you got going on, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.